Hey everyone, it's Cutest, and if you're seeing this video, this is actually being recorded after the previous video where I just went on a tangent about what is it that causes the repetition in pro play, but now I'm actually going to try to answer your questions. So let's get into it. So the first question up, how does T1 get the best talent out of their academy leagues, and why don't other teams try to replicate that strategy in other regions? By Floor. Okay, so the thing is that T1 doesn't just find the best talent. They don't scout the best talent per se, the way that I think the question is suggesting that they do. What ends up happening is that T1 is the creme de la creme, and every single elite, top, cream of the crop, as I already said, player who's on the solo queue ladder, they already know this. And so because of that, they're going to hold out for T1. And so what I mean by that is they're just going to keep grinding, they're going to stay high up the ladder, and they're going to wait for the T1 scout to come to them. And then because they know that they're the best, because so many teams are reaching out to them, they're really high priority, lots of teams are trying really hard to get this person, they're going to end up joining T1. You'll notice that this is a pretty consistent pattern in basically almost any game with the top teams, and that they remain on top for a very long extended period of time. It's really rare that you see a brand new org or you see a random low tier team all of a sudden come across lots of good talent, and then the talent actually stays really good, or that the talent end up leaving that team, and then again they happen to find like really good new talent despite not having become a top team or a top org. This doesn't mean to say that obviously T1 isn't doing anything. To my knowledge, a lot of the T1 players actually give a lot of input when talking about potential candidates. And so having literally 5 of the best players in the world give their input to the coaches or the management that are looking for these people can definitely do a lot of good stuff. Corrosion asks, in Double F's podcast, Joe explained that you and Faker view League of Legends very similarly. How exactly do you view League when it comes to micro-macro item builds, champions, draft? What are your amazing analogies, and how do you say casual player how I view League? So the comment that Joe made about me and Faker viewing it really similarly was on my potential onboarding for T1 in order to end up being a coach for T1. I had to have a multi-long hour conversation with Faker over several different VODs with a translator present. And I was asking lots of questions, basically, about game states. And sometimes we would even get into conversations about why certain sequences just aren't good. And some of the things that I remember that really stood out is sometimes Faker would ask for some time to think about whatever proposed sequence it was, with how a certain lane would go, or how a certain map movement or something would go. And then we would resume talking over and over. And I think that ultimately I was never trying to assert something is this way. What I was always trying to assert is that based on X, Y, and Z, this seems to be like it must be the best based on current game knowledge, or current understanding. And is that the case? And then enter a rebuttal if there is one. And if there isn't one, then that's the proposed current thing until new information is introduced or a new perspective or something. And I think doing that over and over, because that's always been my approach with analyzing things, breaking things down, trying to look at things, trying to look for new information, is just being willing to intake anything and then just willing to try to compute and sequence it all together, reach a conclusion, and then attack that conclusion to see how strong it actually is against lots of different questions or lots of different views. And I mean, to my knowledge, I think that's what he really liked most about the conversation. Alexander asks, who came up with Karthus Jungle? I saw that before Malice played it in Kespa Cup 2018, only Shrimp had multiple competitive games on the pick. This just reeks of LS influence. So Malice actually came up with the pick himself. I remember that they were at the BBQ house or something, and I think that MacNoon was still a part of the team at that time, and the draft needed an AP jungler. Malice ended up suggesting that he could just play Karthus inside of the jungle. All of the Korean players didn't actually know what was going on when he picked Karthus, and to be honest, I don't think I did either at that time. I knew that he played it, but I didn't know to what extent Karthus was really scary. In that game, I remember MacNoon or something ended up laughing that Malice was level 16 when the enemy Lee Sin was 9. To this day, that is the largest jungle EXP gap I've ever seen in a non-FF game or a non-open game. And yeah, I mean, I think that I think that iteration of Karthus in that balance like era with the jungle was probably the strongest League of Legends champion in recent years relative to power level. I think that was an absurdly broken above Z tier champion. Eric Wong asks, outside of C9, is there any coach or analyst that's made a positive impression on you? No, not really. I think that a lot of people don't know that when I was opening up the Discord coaching stuff years ago, ended up going through hundreds, or literally hundreds, me and Max, of different people that would apply for like the coaching roles so that they could get public coaching stuff, because all those coaching websites were popping up, right? You had Gamer Sensei, you had like LOL coaching, you had all these different sites, and I always just thought that, okay, these sites don't accurately vet people, they just let anyone on there, people lie about credentials, they lie about tons of stuff, and so I was like, okay, we're just gonna have a coaching Discord thingy. And the amount of people that I talked to was, you know, it wasn't good. Actually, it was through that Vigar was found originally, and I thought that was really interesting. Realistically, I think that it's going to be really rare because there's just so much available content nowadays that it's very easy to stand out, actually. If you're really, really, really good and you make public content, it's really, really easy to stand out. Unfortunately, I haven't seen anything. Excellent Wow asks, after training Fudge in C9, even though we all know it was only for a short time, do you think it was the right long-term decision for Fudge to swap to mid? Also, do you think there will need to be further roster changes in C9 to fix their problems? So I do still think it is the right term decision for Fudge to swap to mid. I think that Fudge is probably capable of being, in my opinion, the best Western player, because not only is he a magnificent mechanical player, he also is so far ahead of his years mentally in how both he conducts himself like as a person behind the scenes. I mean, sometimes I think people even see it in interviews to a certain extent, given how young he is, but also how far ahead he is of his years strategically and how he looks at things. Fudge has probably one of the longest professional esports careers ahead of him while being an elite, super top of the tier, super top of the line player. And so absolutely I think that switching to mid was probably the best decision, because I think that mid probably just has the most upside for, you know, capabilities that a player can maybe try to tap into in something. And to my knowledge, one of the last things that Fudge said to me before I think we departed or we went separate ways in LA was that he was very happy that he switched to mid. Yeah. Saprix asks, when looking about all the events in your life, which one is the most important for you? Who or what helped you the most? This is a really tricky question, and I say that it's a really tricky question because there's so many really dark periods in my life where so many things had to go the right way. So for instance, there was the period where I was breaking into my mother's house in order to get food and in order to use the internet. And at one point she ended up coming home. She ended up like actually fake leaving for work because she thought something was up, came home, threatened to call the cops on me. It was a really, you know, not good series of events. And while all that was actually happening, I was on a Skype phone call with former Six Jack SKU member, and he just told me that he was going to fly me out to Arizona. And this was during StarCraft 2, and at that point in time, it was one of the worst periods of my life and whatnot, and literally the very next day, my grandmother, woman, you guys might know her from LCS co-streams, took me and my cousin to the airport, and woman saw me off. I ended up leaving for Arizona literally the next day, and that began the true esports adventure. But there's not just that one. There's also coming back from MLG Anaheim at 3, 4 a.m. where SKU's brother, who owned the house, was under the impression that I was not staying as long as I was, and he wanted me out immediately. And with nowhere to really turn to, I ended up having to come to Korea because I told one of the Korean players that was on the team Gosu Gamers at the time that I basically was about to be homeless and I didn't know what to do. And SKU didn't know how to help me out. And one of the ideas at the time was that I go to the Evil Genius's house because the house was abandoned at that point, but there was no running electricity or anything. And so rather than that happen, we explained the situation to Skew's brother. Ended up having to, wait for my passport come in, and then flew out to Korea. And that was another event. I mean, I could go into a darker one where I remember going to the casino and I only had, I had a couple $100, and I remember thinking to myself, like, if I don't make enough money to actually feed myself and get another room tonight, because Artosis and Tasteless were overseas in StarCraft 2, I had thought to myself, I will just take my own life. And I mean, there's so many really intense moments that happened in my life and in my esports adventure that it's really hard to say what is the most important or what is the scariest or the most turbulent. There's also been some really, really good ones, right? Like the first video that I ever put up on Reddit that blew up and completely changed my life, along with like League of Legends and Twitch and everything else. And there's joining T1 is another really, really memorable day, because I just remember, little teenage me, making accounts with SKT and then a random ID with it. Getting added to the League of Legends game was one of the biggest things that I think that I can recall in my entire esports life. There's just so many that I think saying one would be unfair to how much has happened. Because I've been around for a really long time. I'm going on 2 decades. I'm almost at 2 decades, actually, in esports. So that's it. Happy chime noises. Love the videos. Do you think Dragon Souls should be as strong as they are? Do you believe they are important in pro solo, or are they fine? Should one team stacking 3 dragons, other team forced to fight 4th dragon be something that exists in LoL? Absolutely. I think that dragon stacking is an alternate win condition, but it's still one that can be beat even if it's like somewhat achieved. And so I like minigames like this. I think it's totally fine. I think that it's also totally fine that there's going to be teams that are inherently going to just surrender first 2 drakes and then fight for 3rd drake and then get one more shot at 4th drake. This is a pretty mapped out sequence in pro play that typically ends up being the case, but not the end of the world. And so there's not too much that I can say on it. I think that actually League of Legends should have more options to win the game, but I do think that something should be changed with dragons. I think that, maybe at 14 minutes or something, Alcove should expand, and that Dragon, Herald, and Baron could RNG into one of those 4 spots, and that there should not be fixated spawns, because I feel like the game is just getting too repetitive with how things are looking, and I don't think it's good. Thomas Hughes says, where do you stand on the idea of Dragon Sequence being displayed in Champ Select? This is one of the dumbest things that I see so many people actually request, and the reason that it's so dumb is that you want the entire sequence of the Drake. So let's say that you get Cloud, Infernal, Mountain, 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 right? Well, now you're incentivized to draft like a tanky comp, or you're incentivized to, well, I mean, now it's like, why would you ever draft Assassins? So what happens if all week you were scrimming and that sequence never happened? And then what? I don't know. I don't know where to start. The idea that you could go on stage and just drop of the hat, like everything changes, I mean, it's stupid. It's just so dumb. But then on top of that, if people were capable of actually pre-planning this intricately about draft and having the foresight to map out all this other stuff, draft in the meta would not look the way that it does. So it doesn't matter. I mean, add it if you want to. Nothing's going to change. Colo Bolsino says, why are you not shipping more picks? The reason that I don't really ship a lot of picks is I have to be really, really, really confident that the pick is actually worthwhile. The other thing is that the pick can't be too unique for me to like hard ship, because if it's too unique and it requires too much learning, it's just, there's no chance it's going to get picked. Nasus, 2 abilities, one of them is a point and click, the other one's impossible to miss. And so in that regard, it's actually really easy for me to ship, because I feel like it's very easy to get a pro player to go and try to play it, see what's going on with it, and then actually play it. So I feel like there's a balancing act where, because I'm not directly tied into a pro team or anything like that, I'm actually limited on which champions I can try to promote. I've been screaming to the heavens about Fiddlesticks for however long, right? But it doesn't matter how good Fiddlesticks is or how good he can be in so many spots. No one's going to play him. And I mean, there's just not worth shipping. Maybe I can do like videos, like shorts or something on like, you know, champions that are not getting picked in pro play and that are really good. But if I do something like that, I don't want to elaborate too much because I just know it's not worth it. It feels like it's falling on deaf ears. Sayun D2 asks, what time is it? 7 p.m. exactly. What would I consider the best League of Legends played in a game series ever? Draft, gameplay, etc. Asked by Avdi Mihai. The first thing that immediately comes to mind actually is G2 versus Fnatic 2020 Spring Finals. There are obviously instances of like team fighting that are like magnificent, but I do think that if you're asking for a series overall, I think it's that one by G2. Someone asks, favorite Korean street food? I actually do not often get Korean street food. I actually don't think that I've had Korean street food since the early years that I first came to Korea. My favorite meal in Korea is probably 제육덮밥. Will we get a video of what I do for facial skincare routine and products? So I actually don't do anything for skincare. I genuinely don't. Well, I don't do stuff in the traditional sense. I use a loofah and I use a cleanser a couple of times a week, but outside of that, I don't actually do anything. Most of the stuff that I do with my skin is, well, you guys can't really see it, but I have blackout shades everywhere. I rarely go out into the sun. I've been that way pretty much almost the entire time that I've been in Korea. And the other stuff that I do is I do, obviously, skincare treatments at clinics. I do laser stuff, and I get Regeron Healer injections into my skin every couple of months, which is, I think, salmon semen, polynucleotides. And then I also do laser, did I already say I do laser treatments? I think I said, yeah, I do laser treatments. I do toning lasers, and I do other type of laser treatments. And that is pretty much all that I do. G asks, excited for the League MMO or just focused on League, or are you going to play the MMO? The MMO is all that I'm holding out for, okay? You know how they say that an elderly person on their deathbed in the hospital will hold out for their loved ones? I'm holding out for the MMO. If that thing doesn't come, I'm dead. And if it does come, I'm going to do a complete turnaround, okay? It's going to be a miracle, all right? All of my bitterness, negativity, everything is going to go, it's going to just regress. Amazing. Cutest Pokemon. I don't know what I would actually say is the cutest Pokemon. I could imagine Raichu would be really cute. I think Raichu's really cute. Is it just Raichu? I think it's Raichu. Raichu looks like he needs a big hug. Yeah, I think it's just Raichu. This one tilts me to, like, I don't even know if you're going to put this in the video. I know that you wanted me to answer this just because you want me to you actually want me to have a breakdown. Dune asks, would building your own esports org in Korea and competing in CK and possibly LCK be an option for you in the future? How? With what money? 39K net worth. But then in addition to that, it's franchised. So you can't even get in. But also, what a horrible decision it is to make an esports team. It actually is one of the... I can't. I'm done. We're done? We're good. We're good. One of the last questions that I will answer, and it's because it's something that I used to talk about in a lot of the podcasts and other stuff. I'll probably end up doing another video like this, but someone asked me if I think that there's ever really going to be changes inside of pro play in terms of how practice and infrastructure and everything else is run. And I think the answer is no. The reason I think the answer is no is because everywhere you look, you have non-experts hiring experts. And no matter what happens with the meta, what new pro players come in, that so far is not going to change. And thus, it's poison from the ground up.